Hey guys, tonight we slip into the shadowed streets of Renaissance Rome, cobbled alleys echoing with gossip, the scent of incense mixing with the sweat of summer clergy, and behind towering Vatican walls, a power vacuum you can almost hear breathing. The Pope is dead, and you're not just here to mourn, you're here to pick the next one. But don't let the sacred setting fool you. The College of Cardinals doesn't operate like a saintly book club. You're about to walk into one of the most secretive and politically charged elections in all of human history, where holiness takes a back seat to favors, family ties, and just a dash of poison. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it there? Midnight in Manila? 4 a.m. in Florence? I love hearing that stuff. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the torchlit corridors of the Apostolic Palace, your red robes brushing the dusty marble floors. The papal court is buzzing, not with prayers, but speculation. Who has the favor of the French king? Who's secretly promised land to Venice? Who brought the most gold? The Pope's funeral barely concluded this morning, and already every cardinal in Rome is subtly nudging for advantage. You're one of them. Sure, you pretend it's about piety, but let's be honest. You've got a few deals brewing yourself. Outside, the Roman crowds press against the gates, hoping to glimpse something, anything, of the sacred proceedings. But the real drama is inside. The Sistine Chapel, not yet graced with Michelangelo's frescoes, feels cold and cavernous. Tomorrow, it will become your prison until a new pope is chosen. Yes, prison. That's how this works. The conclave begins when the cardinals are locked in, literally cumclave, with key. No one in, no one out. Not until that chimney gives a puff of white smoke. You've brought your bedding, your writing desk. Your valet is gone now. No servants, just you, your thoughts, and 30-odd other men with rings worth more than villages. The mood, tense. Half these men are eyeing each other like chess opponents, the other half like potential executioners. You've heard stories, the whispered threats, the poisoned chalices, the mysterious fevers. In this game, sainthood is optional. Strategy is essential. Your main rival is Cardinal Giuliano della Rovere, charismatic, ruthless, backed by the French. You nod politely at dinner, exchange Latin pleasantries, but you're both calculating, already lining up votes. You hear a curious detail over roasted quail. One cardinal has brought 3 mules laden with books, the kind of books you don't read, the kind bound with leather and filled with Florentine florins. Bribes, in other words. You're not shocked. You just wonder if it'll be enough. Historians still argue whether these early conclaves were genuinely spiritual ceremonies or just high-stakes political theater wrapped in incense. The truth? Probably both. You feel it, the gravitas of history, but also the oily press of power. Sleep that night comes fitfully. You lie on your cot, staring at the dark ceiling. Somewhere, a candle flickers out. You can hear snoring, murmured prayers, the clink of a rosary, and in your mind, numbers. Who might switch sides? Who can be swayed? Who must be stopped? By dawn, the first vote, a secret ballot, written on slips of parchment. You scribble a name. Not your own? Not yet. That would be too obvious. You need to watch, wait, test the waters. You fold the parchment in half, then in half again, and carry it to the altar. You place it in a silver chalice, and suddenly, the whole thing feels less sacred than it does strategic. The results? A muddle. No clear favorite. The frontrunner, Rodrigo Borgia, has a strong base. So does Della Rovere. You're in the middle, a swing vote with a name few whisper, but many need. And that, oddly enough, is where the real power lies. Someone offers you a quiet chat after dinner. It's not a coincidence. Nothing is. He speaks in riddles. The one who carries Spain in his heart might also carry gold in his sleeves. You smile, nod, pretend not to understand. You'll think about it. Meanwhile, Rome outside pulses like a living organ. The people wait for smoke. You wait for leverage. And the church? Well, the church waits for a pope. But you know better. The church doesn't choose the pope. The politics do. If you're winding down, stretching out under the covers, or just letting the day fade, this story is for you. The next morning, the doors slam shut again. You hear the bolt fall into place, echoing like a gavel across the Sistine Chapel. From this moment on, you are officially in conclave, sealed away from the outside world, breathing recycled air and suspicion. You sit at your narrow wooden bench, back aching already. Someone coughed all night in the cot beside yours, and there's no escaping the scent of damp wool and holy ambition. Breakfast is a thin broth and bread, barely toasted, probably for the best. You'll need a clear head. The second vote comes quickly. You write the same name as yesterday, still feeling things out. Across from you, Cardinal Borgia twitches a lip in what could almost be a smirk. He's gaining. But the real moment of tension arrives when the ballots are burned. Two elderly deacons drop the pile into a brazier and light it. This is how the smoke signal works. Black smoke means no decision. White smoke means a pope has been chosen. But as the parchment curls into flame, you notice something odd. The smoke is gray? Someone forgot to add the proper chemical mix. Again, this happens more than you'd think. The Romans outside groan. Is it a pope? Isn't it? You hear a child yell, "Just pick one already." Inside, of course, you're not in a hurry. The longer the conclave drags on, the more deals can be brokered. By midday, whispers pass like wind through the chapel. Cardinal Orsini wants assurance that his nephew will become archbishop. Cardinal Sforza wants a villa near Milan. And you? You want the next pope to owe you. You sit beneath frescoes that haven't yet become famous. The ceiling is plain. Michelangelo hasn't come to town yet. It's ironic, really. This space will one day be filled with angels, prophets, and divine judgment. Right now, it's mostly gas and hot takes. The rules say no outside communication. Naturally, everyone ignores that. One cardinal receives a note tucked inside a loaf of bread. Another smuggles in a coded message hidden in the spine of a prayer book. You pretend not to notice. Plausible deniability is practically holy. Later, you share a bench with Cardinal Piccolomini, a shrewd but likable man. He jokes about staging a false miracle just to shake things up. "What if I claimed my breakfast roll bore the face of St. Peter?" he says with a grin. You both chuckle, quietly. Laughter in the chapel is frowned upon, but it happens more often than anyone admits. Historians still argue whether early conclaves were truly sealed, or merely symbolically so. Some claim that messages flowed freely, and that bribery was openly accepted under veils of ritual. Others defend the system's sanctity. You're living proof that both views are half true. As the sun leans westward, the light through the high windows slants golden, painting long shadows across the stone floor. You lean back, reflect, scheme. It's becoming clear. Borgia has the numbers, or nearly enough. You've seen his allies nod during prayers, their amens more like coded affirmations. But he needs one more push, and that's where you come in. That night, another cardinal, old, bent like a withered olive tree, slides onto the bench beside you. He doesn't speak, just hands you a folded scrap of parchment. You glance down. One word. Damani. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. They want the vote. You don't sleep. The air is thick, not with incense, but with calculation. You shift under your thin blanket, listening to the rhythmic creaks of other men tossing, turning, all waiting. In the chapel at dawn, the ballots are passed out again. Your hand trembles, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. You hesitate. Then you write, Rodrigo Borgia. The votes are counted in solemn procession, one by one, each name called out, echoed in Latin, then recorded. Borgia, 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 and then the final count. He has it. White smoke curls lazily into the morning sky, this time unmistakable. The crowd outside erupts in cheers. Doves are released. Bells toll across the city, and inside the conclave, you bow your head. Not just in reverence, but in relief. You back the right man. He chooses the name Alexander VI. You rise, offer your congratulations. He smiles thinly, whispers something about gratitude, and you know. Your real reward comes later. Later, when titles are assigned, territories reassigned, and nephews promoted. For now, though, you are no longer a cardinal locked in waiting. You are part of a papacy born in smoke and sealed in silence. You'd think a papal election would end with prayer and solemn gratitude. Not quite. You barely finish saying Deo gratias before the real celebration begins. And by celebration, you mean negotiations. The new pope, Alexander VI, retires briefly for reflection. Translation: he needs to review who he owes what. And believe me, his list is longer than the line for communion on Easter. You mill about with the others, sharing tepid wine and diplomatic half-smiles. Behind closed doors, favors are being tallied like receipts at a nobleman's wedding. Someone just got promised a bishopric in Toledo. Another was gifted 3 vineyards in Umbria. You're waiting for your token of gratitude. But before the Pope can dispense his papal presence, he must deliver the Urbi et Orbi blessing to the city and the world. You follow the procession to the balcony overlooking St. Peter's Square. The sunlight is blinding. The crowd roars. He raises his hand in benediction. You watch closely. Not for the words, they're always the same, but for who stands closest to him, who gets the longest handshake, who he smiles at like they share a secret. And then it begins. The subtle dance of appointments, the real business of the papacy. What most people don't know is that during the Renaissance, the papacy wasn't just a spiritual office. It was a geopolitical nuclear button. The Pope controlled armies, taxes, borders, and, to a shocking degree, the fate of Europe's royal families. So naturally, the College of Cardinals didn't elect saints. They elected survivors, sometimes warlords, occasionally visionaries, frequently businessmen in cassocks. Take Borgia. Rodrigo was no fool. He knew that securing the papacy didn't just mean leading the church. It meant stabilizing his own house, the Borgia family, and extending its influence like the roots of an olive tree into every crevice of Italy. You receive a summons that evening. A quiet chamber, lit with beeswax candles. Tapestries on the walls depicting biblical scenes. Although the Last Supper one looks suspiciously like a banquet you attended last year. The Pope sits in a high-backed chair, not yet wearing his triple tiara. He greets you with a tired smile. You played the game well, he murmurs. Rome remembers such things. He hands you a scroll. A minor title, Bishop of a sleepy diocese in northern Italy. Not glamorous, but strategic. Close to Venice. Border tensions. You can do something with this. As you bow, he adds casually, if your loyalty remains, other doors may open. You leave the room feeling a little taller. Historians still argue whether Rodrigo Borgia's rise was an act of cunning genius or the beginning of the papacy's moral collapse. To you, it's Monday. In the weeks that follow, you watch Alexander VI consolidate his power. He moves swiftly, appoints his son Cesare as cardinal, a teenager, clever, vicious, and disturbingly charming. It's nepotism in full bloom, and nobody's even pretending anymore. And yet, here's the twist, it works. For a time, anyway. Rome stabilizes. Tax systems improve. The Vatican becomes not just a holy site, but a bureaucratic marvel. The Borgia machine hums. Meanwhile, you attend a banquet hosted by Cardinal della Rovere. Yes, your old rival. He didn't win, but he didn't vanish either. He's biding time, watching, waiting. You lock eyes across the table. The duck is seasoned with rosemary. The wine tastes faintly of something bitter. And still, deals are whispered between bites. It's at this banquet that you hear one of your favorite Renaissance phrases, God is with the highest bidder, said half-jokingly. Mostly. One particularly chatty bishop leans in and tells you about a rumor that Borgia had offered 4 cardinals entire estates in Sicily in exchange for votes. One even got a mistress tossed in, he whispers, then snorts into his goblet. You pretend to be shocked. It's good manners. But the truth? You're only surprised it wasn't 5 cardinals. Later, walking home through lamplit streets, you feel the pulse of Rome beneath your feet. Horses clatter over stone. The Tiber glistens like oil. Statues watch you pass. Saints with chipped noses. Emperors draped in moss. And you? You're not just part of history now. You're writing it in ink, wine, and gold. What time is it where you are right now? Is the world already quiet around you? The thing about Renaissance Rome is that power always comes with a surname. And if your surname sounds vaguely familiar, congratulations. You're probably someone's cousin, nephew, or trusted godson, which is just nepotism in Latin robes. You start noticing it more now. The young man reading scripture in the chapel, that's Cardinal Farnese's illegitimate son. The new treasurer, somehow related to the Pope's barber's wife. Everyone is someone's something, and if you're not, well, good luck getting invited to lunch. Your own rise is slow but steady. The title you received, the sleepy bishopric up north, is beginning to prove useful. The town itself is modest, but strategically located near a trade route. That means taxes, and taxes mean influence. So you do what any good cleric would do. You send half your letters to Rome and the other half to Florence. Keep both sides flattered, and nobody asks too many questions. Then one afternoon, as you sit reviewing a shipment ledger masked as a prayer list, a messenger arrives. Another cardinal's nephew wants to meet. You've heard this song before. The meeting is arranged in a small vineyard just outside the city, under the guise of a retreat. There's wine, bread, a lute player who seems to know only 3 chords, but plays them with vigor. And then, the proposition? Back this young nephew, freshly ordained, for a higher position, and in return, they'll support your elevation to archbishop. It's bold, brazen, beautifully Renaissance. You agree, of course. Not because it's right, because it's how the game works. The term cardinal nephew becomes more than just a job description. It's practically a career track. The Pope appoints his relatives to key positions, ensuring that loyalty flows through bloodlines. The system isn't secret, it's strategy. Historians still argue whether this nepotism weakened the church or simply reflected the era's values. After all, Renaissance Italy wasn't a meritocracy. It was a mosaic of dynasties, stitched together with coin, land, and last names. You attend a ceremony a week later. The new nephew is being elevated. The vestments are a little too large, the Latin a little too shaky. But no one seems to mind. He smiles, bows, kneels, and just like that, he's a prince of the church. You lean over to the cardinal beside you and mutter, "That's the first time I've seen someone promoted after dropping a chalice mid-mass." The cardinal chuckles, then quickly pretends he didn't hear. That night, you dine with an older bishop who remembers a time when appointments were based on theological insight. He stirs his soup absently and says, "I used to care who was holy. Now, I just care who's clever." You nod, slowly. In this world, cleverness is a kind of holiness, especially when paired with a well-fed purse. Then there's the Orsini family. Powerful, rich, aggressively territorial. They've placed 3 cardinals in Rome, all of them conveniently cousins. They throw lavish feasts under the guise of charity, but everyone knows what they really are: campaign events for future popes. You're invited to one. The villa is illuminated with hundreds of lanterns. Musicians play under citrus trees. There's even a caged leopard, for reasons no one explains. You sip honeyed wine and marvel at how holiness and hubris can share a sofa. You overhear a young cleric explaining the path to power. First, you serve the right bishop. Then you serve the right pope. Then, if you're lucky, you serve yourself. You smile. It's not wrong. And through all this, you begin to see the outline of something more. A future. One not just tied to your bishopric or your alliances, but to the throne itself. Because here's the secret they don't print in the holy books. Anyone can become pope. You just need to survive long enough. So you keep smiling. You keep writing letters. You keep nodding at the right jokes and frowning at the right tragedies. And you never, ever forget a name. Because in Rome, forgetting a name is like misplacing a dagger. You never know when you'll need it again. You wake early now, instinctively. Not for morning prayers. Those are just habit at this point. But to read letters before anyone else does. Your servant brings them in a silver tray, all tied with ribbon, scented with wax. Half the messages begin with flattery, the rest with veiled threats. One stands out. It's from Florence. The seal bears the Medici crest. You unfold it with care. They write in that charming, passive-aggressive style only bankers can master. Gracious, elegant, and implicitly dangerous. They speak of opportunities for spiritual collaboration and shared ambitions. You read between the lines. They want something. They always do. You pour a glass of watered wine and consider your options. The Medici control money, art, and most of northern Italy by way of cousins. Aligning with them could mean prestige, but it could also mean entanglement in Florentine chaos. The Renaissance papacy, after all, is not a spiritual sanctuary. It's a chessboard made of marble. You're just one bishop among many, but you know something most don't admit. The Vatican isn't led, it's managed. Papal power must be curated, preserved, balanced. Like a vineyard pruned just so. You think back to when you first entered Holy Service. You wanted to change the world. Now, you're trying not to be trampled by it. Historians still debate when the papacy transformed from a sacred office into what some called the world's richest kingdom without a crown. Some trace it to the Avignon years, others to the Borgia era. But you see it happening every day, in whispered promises, ceremonial handshakes, and forged signatures passed off as miracles. One afternoon, you're summoned to Rome. A Vatican council is forming to negotiate a dispute between two dukes. You're told it's purely spiritual, which means it's mostly political. The council is held in a quiet, incense-heavy room off the Apostolic Palace. High ceilings, gold trim, uncomfortable chairs. You recognize most of the faces. Cardinals, who've traded more property than prayers. The dispute, you're told, is about land. But that's a simplification. It's about taxation, silk trade routes, and which duke will fund the next crusade, which everyone knows is mostly symbolic by now. You speak carefully, suggest compromise, quote scripture, smile at the right moments. When the meeting ends, a cardinal claps your shoulder and says, "You speak like a priest, but think like a banker." You take it as the compliment it was meant to be. That night, you walk the Vatican gardens. The moon hangs low over the cypress trees. Somewhere, a nightingale sings. It's almost enough to make you forget the layers of intrigue woven into these walls. Almost. You stop by a fountain, old, moss-covered, shaped like a lion. There's a coin at the bottom, glinting silver in the water. You toss in one of your own, not for luck, for leverage. And the next morning, the Medici letter is answered, warmly, casually, and with just enough vagueness to keep them guessing. Later that week, a visiting French cardinal tries to corner you during Mass, pushing for favors in Avignon. You politely excuse yourself mid-hallelujah. He gets the message, because now you understand. The Holy See is not a throne. It's a seesaw. Balance is everything. Too much power to one family, and the rest will pull back. Too much reform, and tradition bites. Too many favors, and you lose your spine. Not enough, and you lose your friends. So you balance, carefully, constantly, just like the Pope himself. You wonder sometimes what it's like at the very top, to wear the triple crown, to speak and watch empires shiver, to sign a bull and rewrite someone's life in ink. But then you remember, every pope is just a cardinal with more robes. And robes, as you've learned, are easy to stain. You've always known there's theater in religion. Incense, chants, dramatic pauses. But nothing compares to the performance that unfolds when the Vatican gets political. This week, the stage is set in a long, echoing chamber, lined with tapestries depicting the apostles. Very pious, very embroidered, very misleading. The meeting today is about a kingdom in crisis. Officially, the Pope wants to guide a peaceful reconciliation. Unofficially, you're mediating a proxy war between France and Spain. You take your seat along the polished table, where holy men sip watered wine and sharpen metaphors like blades. Each phrase is coded. Spiritual responsibility means land. Moral duty means troops. Divine favor? That's just who's paying more. You listen, you nod. You pretend to care about the theological angle. But your real focus is on who aligns with whom. Cardinal de Villiers is leaning toward France. He always does. Cardinal Mancini is stalling, probably waiting to see who offers him more wine or wool. You speak, eventually. Not too early, not too late. Enough to seem pious, but not so much that you sound ambitious. The trick is to appear neutral while positioning your allies quietly behind the scenes. It's a talent, one that doesn't come from scripture. It comes from surviving. Historians still argue whether the Renaissance church was corrupt or simply pragmatic, whether deals like these, brokered in hushed voices under gold ceilings, betrayed the faith or saved it from chaos. The answer, like most things in Rome, depends on who's writing the scroll. You leave the meeting with 3 new favors owed to you. That's what matters. Later, someone will ask what you accomplished, and you'll say, "We preserved unity." What you really preserved was relevance. That night, you dine with a Florentine envoy. He's young, elegant, and absolutely terrified of spilling his wine. He tells you of a new play being performed in Florence, a satire mocking the cardinals. They depict you all as old men chasing gold with holy water flasks, he says nervously. You pretend to be offended, then laugh, because it's not entirely wrong. Back in your chambers, you review your notes, your schedule, your list of rising families. You've started ranking the cardinals, not just by influence, but by durability. Who's aging gracefully? Who's drinking too much? Who has sons to carry their name? And who's secretly supporting a mistress through monastery donations? It sounds salacious, but in Rome, it's just math. You visit a friend the next morning, an elderly monk who spent his life copying manuscripts. He shows you a book illuminated with gold leaf and lapis. It's a psalter, exquisitely detailed. And there, in the margins, a doodle, a tiny figure kicking another off a papal throne. Accidental, the monk says with a wink. You smile. Even the monks get it. A few days later, news arrives from Naples. A rebellion. Minor, but messy. The king requests Vatican support. The Pope hesitates. Why? Because there's a Medici marriage tied into the region. And if Naples falls, Florence trembles. And if Florence trembles, so do the Vatican's bankers. So you're sent, yes, you, to draft a letter. Carefully, lovingly, menacingly. The language must be divine, but the intent, pure politics. You write, "Let our holy voice be the balm that calms your noble hearts, while reminding all sovereigns that God watches over unity, and so do we." Subtle enough to pass as spiritual, clear enough to sound like a threat. The signature? The Pope's. But the words? Yours. When the letter is sent, you watch the courier ride out at dawn, cloak snapping, hooves striking cobblestone, and you think, somewhere in Naples, a duke is about to panic. You return to the chapel that evening, not for prayer, but for the view. The setting sun pours golden light through stained glass, turning stone saints into flame. You sit in a back pew, alone. It's easy to forget, in all the scheming, that this place was once built for silence, for solace. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and wonder if God is still here, watching all this. Does he laugh or sigh? Morning comes with the faint smell of smoke. Not fire, thankfully, just the perfume kind burned in braziers along the Vatican corridors. You dress slowly. Robes, sash, ring, everything in order. But today feels different. Word spreads before you even reach the breakfast table. A new appointment is being made. A vacant bishopric in France, highly contested. The front runner? A man no one had even heard of 6 months ago. Curious, you find out why by lunch. He's the nephew of a cardinal from Avignon. The same cardinal who mysteriously switched his vote during the last conclave. You sigh, then smile. Simony, the sale of church offices. Technically a sin, practically an industry. The church officially condemns it. Every bull, every council, every dusty theologian shaking a finger. But here's the twist. Everyone does it. They just do it with style. You've seen it firsthand. Donations to monasteries, loans to dioceses, gifts of land, livestock, gold, even paintings. Each one greasing a palm for a spiritual promotion. A bishopric here, a cardinal's hat there. Historians still argue whether simony corrupted the church from within, or whether it simply reflected the economic logic of its time. After all, Europe was changing. Money was power, and power flowed through Rome like wine at a feast. You're invited to a private gathering that evening. Not a full banquet, those are for public show, but a quiet dinner in the apartments of Cardinal Sforza. The man is clever, rich, and always 6 moves ahead. The room is intimate. Tapestries, candlelight, figs on silver trays. The cardinal sits back in a velvet chair and asks, casually, "What do you think grace costs these days?" It's a joke, of course, but not really. You sip your wine and say, "Depends on who's buying." He laughs. And just like that, you're in. The evening's true purpose? A new alliance. He wants your support for a future conclave. Not now, but soon. Very soon. He believes the current pope, Alexander VI, is weakening. Whispers of illness. A fall from his horse. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. In exchange for your vote, eventually, he offers influence over your diocese's taxes. A few favors with the papal auditors, he says, to keep your books holy. You agree, of course, not with words, but with a raised glass and a knowing glance. That's how it's done. Outside, the stars are starting to shimmer above the rooftops. Rome always looks cleaner by moonlight. You walk home through narrow streets where stray cats patrol like tiny, hungry bishops. Somewhere, a lute is playing off-key. Back in your chambers, you remove your ring and stare at your reflection in the wash basin. You still look like a cleric, but you feel like a merchant. The next day, a courier brings news from Florence. A cathedral tower has collapsed. No one hurt, thankfully, but the city is shaken. Rumors of divine displeasure. You know better. It's probably poor stonework. But still, it's an opportunity. You pen a letter to the city's cardinal, offering Vatican support and blessings, along with a discreet suggestion that now might be the perfect time for a visible show of papal favor. Perhaps a new bishop. Perhaps someone who's recently been very helpful in Rome. You send it, you wait. 3 days later, the response. Grateful acceptance, generous donation, and yes, a seat at the upcoming council for you. That's Simone too, just dressed in silk. But here's the thing. Everyone plays the game. Some pretend they don't. Others play poorly. A few, like you, play beautifully. You visit the Sistine Chapel again, alone this time. The frescoes have begun. Michelangelo is on scaffolds, grumbling in Tuscan, surrounded by buckets of pigment and disdain. He hardly notices you. You sit quietly and look up at the ceiling, not yet complete, but already divine. Figures twist in impossible beauty. Muscle, motion, fire. A swirl of sacred ambition. You think, even artists negotiate with heaven. A young novice walks by and sees you staring. Do you think the ceiling is for God? He asks. You smile. Number, I think it's for us. So we remember to look up. The novice nods, unsure, walks away. You remain. Because in a world where grace is bought and sold, beauty is still one of the few things no one can counterfeit. Rodrigo Borgia, now Pope Alexander VI, has been on the throne for several years. And Rome? Rome is pulsing. With gold. With gossip. With something thicker than incense in the air. You've watched his papacy unfold like an opera. Lavish, scandalous, impossible to look away from. And now, you're invited to its most exclusive performance yet, a banquet at the Vatican itself. Not a typical feast. This is a political pageant masked in roasted peacock and velvet chairs. You arrive in full regalia, robes freshly pressed, a ring polished to a mirror sheen. The room is breathtaking. High ceilings draped in banners, torchlight dancing on marble floors. The scent of roast meat and wine is rich enough to make you forget, for a moment, that you're technically still on church grounds. And there he is, Alexander VI, older now, but no less formidable. His eyes scan the room like a hawk that knows exactly where every mouse is hiding. He welcomes guests one by one, each a thread in the vast Borgia web. Spanish nobles, Italian dukes, 2 cardinals from Hungary, even an envoy from Constantinople. There for reasons no one says aloud. You're seated 3 places from him, close enough to matter. Not so close that you're under constant scrutiny. Perfect. The wine flows. The courses arrive. Duck glazed in honey, almond stuffed quail, trays of olives that glisten like polished onyx. Everyone smiles. Everyone lies. You exchange pleasantries with the French ambassador. He tells you his king is very fond of Rome. You tell him Rome always cherishes France. It's like watching 2 cats politely pretend they're not about to fight. Then comes the moment that no one wants, but everyone expects. A toast. Alexander rises, slowly, carefully, and lifts his goblet. To the church, he says, and to those who make her not just holy, but wise. It's a line soaked in implication. You raise your goblet and sip, then glance around. And there, a flash of hesitation. 2 cardinals exchange glances. The ambassador fidgets. Someone wipes their mouth too quickly. You know that look. Something's coming. Later, in a hallway lined with statues, you're approached by a trusted cleric from Spain. He speaks quietly. There are rumors, he says, that someone will not leave tonight. You blink. He means poison. It's not unheard of. Renaissance Rome is no stranger to surprise funerals. Popes have food tasters. Cardinals switch goblets. The kitchens? A battlefield in their own right. Historians still argue whether these stories are exaggerated, products of anti-Catholic propaganda or Renaissance drama. But you've been here long enough to know. Where there's smoke, there's probably arsenic. You make your excuses, step away from dessert, and quietly observe. Nothing happens. At least, not tonight. But the tension lingers like bad perfume. A few days later, the rumors crystallize. A cardinal, your old friend, Cardinal Orsini, is dead. Sudden illness. Sweating. Vomiting. Gone before sunrise. The diagnosis? Natural causes. Which in Rome means no one could prove it. You attend the funeral. The air is thick with incense and suspicion. You say the prayers. You make the sign of the cross. You avoid the wine at the wake. Back in your study, you reread your letters. You weigh your alliances. You pray, but more out of habit than hope. Because in the Borgia court, even the saints are cautious. And then, a letter, sealed in blue wax, stamped with a lion. Florence again. They request your intervention in a small territorial dispute. Nothing urgent, nothing public, just a few well-placed words at the next consistory. You agree, of course, because survival here depends not on piety, but positioning, and you've become very good at that. As you walk the Vatican corridors that evening, the candlelight flickers strangely. Statues of apostles cast long, accusing shadows. The air feels heavy. You pause at a window. Rome below, is glowing, noisy, magnificent. And you think, you haven't been elected Pope? Not yet. But you've learned how to breathe the air they breathe. And that's the first step. You should have trusted your instincts about the banquet. The air was too thick, the smiles too tight, the olives too perfectly aligned on their silver trays. And now, Rome is buzzing like a kicked beehive, because Cardinal Orsini is dead. And not the old frail kind of dead. He was speaking Latin fluently before dinner, and then collapsed into his soup kind. You don't say anything. You just watch. The Vatican issues a very official, very vague statement. Something about heart failure, a tragic reminder of our earthly frailty. You've seen that line before. It's the same line they used when another cardinal fell down a flight of stairs, twice, and yet nobody panics. Because, strangely, death has always had a seat at the papal table. Poison is just another spice in the Renaissance recipe. You simply learn to taste around it. Historians still argue whether Orsini was murdered, whether it was Alexander VI or Cesare Borgia, or some third party playing a deeper game. Some even suggest it was illness, coincidence, divine retribution. But you know better. In Rome, coincidence is just a scheme you didn't see coming. You pay your respects at Orsini's funeral. You kneel. You pray. You nod politely to mourners, some of whom are already measuring his curtains for their new chambers. It's tradition. Later, you meet a papal guard near the chapel. You've bribed him before, for access, for silence, for scheduling help. He tells you what the physicians won't. His lips were black, he whispers, and his nails. Classic signs. Belladonna, maybe, or something more exotic. Venice imports fascinating things. You thank him, slip a coin into his palm, move on. Because in Rome, information is currency, and you're saving up. That evening, the Vatican hosts another gathering, much smaller, much quieter. You're invited. The guest list, tightly controlled, a handful of cardinals, a few bishops, one man from Naples who claims to be a merchant, though his robe is oddly clean for someone who loads ships. You go, not because you want to, because you must. The room is darker this time, the food simpler. No fish, no fowl. Bread, wine, a few dates. People aren't taking chances. Then a toast. Not from the Pope, he's absent tonight, but from Cesare Borgia. He stands, young and radiant in his cardinal's red, though everyone knows he's no priest at heart. His voice is smooth, his words calculated. To clarity, he says, and to the strength of those who remain. You feel the chill, despite the warmth of the room. Cesare is no fool. He's clever, vicious, magnetic. And increasingly, he's the true center of power. He's taken command of the papal guard. He's reorganized the administration. He's advised several bishops into early retirement. And now, he's watching you. You sip your wine, slowly, eyes on the goblet, nose tuned for anything metallic. You've learned to taste fear with a gentle swirl. You leave early, make an excuse, claim fatigue. In truth, your fatigue is real, but it's not from walking. It's from calculating. You return to your chambers and triple bolt the door. You toss the goblet into the hearth. It hisses, just a little. Not enough to be proved, just enough to remind you. You sleep finally, dreamless, heavy. The next morning, you receive a scroll. Thick parchment, crisp seal, a summons. From the Pope. Private audience. Noon. You arrive on time. Always arrive on time. Alexander VI looks worse than you remember. Pale, sunken-eyed, with fingers that tremble when he lifts his wine. He gestures for you to sit, and then he says, "Loyalty has never been more valuable than now." You nod. You wait. He offers you a choice. A new diocese. Farther north. Wealthier. More complicated. But also safer in some ways. A reward. Or a test. You accept. Of course you do. Because turning it down would be foolish. And staying in Rome too long, that would be fatal. So you bow. You thank him. And you realize you're not just surviving anymore. You're being moved. You're part of a longer game. And if you play carefully, very carefully, you might still be standing when the next smoke rises. By the time you reach your new diocese, the air already feels different. Literally. Fresher, thinner, less saturated with incense and secrets. The town is nestled between hills. Its cathedral modest but proud. The streets lined with fig trees and vendors who know the names of their chickens. At first glance, it almost feels like a retreat. But you know better. This isn't exile. It's insulation. The Vatican didn't send you here to relax. They sent you here to distance yourself from the boiling pot that is Rome, while still being useful when the time comes to stir it again. And that moment might be sooner than you think. Your days are filled with paperwork, taxes, parish disputes, petitions for sainthood, requests for papal dispensations, some of them laughably petty. One noblewoman wants permission to marry her cousin's cousin. Another wants to build a chapel in honor of her dog. You approve some, stall others. Because here, as in Rome, decisions aren't about right or wrong. They're about leverage. Then one morning, a courier arrives in Vatican red, bearing a sealed papal document, a papal bull. That gets your attention. The bull is a proclamation on regional land disputes and their moral adjudication. Sounds dull? Isn't. You read between the lines. It's a land grab. The Pope, by divine authority of course, is legitimizing a noble family's claim to territory they have no legal right to. Why? Because they backed Cesare Borgia's last campaign, and now they want payment. You're expected to endorse it, to deliver the message from your pulpit with conviction and charm. You do. Not because it's right, because it's what's required. The congregation claps politely. The local lord nods, satisfied. Coins clink in your cathedral's donation box a little louder that Sunday. Later that evening, a scholar from Bologna visits you. He's pale, stooped, with ink-stained fingers and a mind full of Latin clauses. He's writing a treatise on the modern papacy, whatever that means, and wants to discuss how papal bulls are created. You pour wine and give him the polite version. Scripture, divine inspiration, spiritual necessity. Then he says, "But surely not all bulls come from God, yes?" You raise an eyebrow. Number some come from debt. He blinks, then smiles. Historians still argue over the legitimacy of many Renaissance-era bulls. Some were genuinely doctrinal. Others were thinly veiled business contracts with ribbons. You've seen both. One particularly bizarre bull, issued during Pope Sixtus IV's tenure, authorized indulgences for those who contributed to the construction of a bridge. A holy bridge. A bridge that, mysteriously, led directly to a cousin's estate. Then there's the bull that granted a king annulment from a politically inconvenient wife, because apparently her soul was too Protestant in temperament. You don't even try to make sense of that one. In your quieter moments, you consider writing your own treatise, How to Draft a Bull Without Mooing. Chapter 1, Choose a Goal. Chapter 2, Wrap it in Latin. Chapter 3, Say Amen. Instead, you write letters, back to Rome, carefully worded, just enough to remind them you're still watching, still useful, still loyal. And then, a surprise. You're asked to return to the Vatican for a special council. The topic? Not sin, not salvation. Maps. You arrive in Rome under a cloudy sky. The city smells like rain and ambition. The Vatican is buzzing with unusual energy. Something's happening. You enter the council chamber, where a large table is covered in scrolls and charts. Borders, rivers, mountains, gold mines, salt routes. You're here to help redraw boundaries, literally, because a pope's pen can shift kingdoms. And you hold that pen now. As you trace a river with your fingertip, suggesting it bends slightly east, closer to your allies, farther from your rivals, you feel it again, that quiet thrill. You are no longer a simple priest, no longer just a bishop with a charming voice and steady hand. You are part of the mechanism, and the mechanism moves everything. Before the meeting ends, you're handed another document, unsigned, unsealed, a draft of a new bull. The title, On the Unity of Christendom Amidst Political Realities. Translation, the church is about to endorse a war, and they want your edits. You take it home, read it by candlelight, one sentence at a time. You make changes, tiny ones, strategic ones. You sleep well that night, because in Rome, true power doesn't roar. It whispers in bulls. There's a phrase you've come to admire in Vatican circles. He who holds the ink controls the outcome. You think about that now, as you reread the draft papal bull in your chambers. The wax hasn't even dried on the final version, and already you're hearing rumors of armies gathering. The document isn't quite a declaration of war. It's more elegant than that. A call for divinely sanctioned intervention, a correction of heretical governance, and the ever-useful protection of Christian pilgrims. It sounds pious, nearly poetic, but you know what it really means. Lines are being drawn. Again, you give your approval, with a few minor phrasing adjustments to make it more palatable to the French. Unity sells better than supremacy. When the final bull is read aloud in St. Peter's, the reaction is exactly what you'd expect. Nodding heads, murmured prayers, and a discreet flurry of diplomatic letters flying out of Rome before the echo fades from the marble. You linger after the ceremony, beneath the archways, listening to the quiet shuffle of sandaled feet and the rustle of parchment. The Vatican isn't a fortress, it's a machine. And it hums beautifully when every cog knows its place. But even machines have gears that grind in the shadows. That's when you hear it, casually, in the sacristy, between two priests discussing inventory. The Spanish ambassador, one of them whispers, claims the Holy Father is spying on his own cardinals. You pause, not because you're surprised, because you're already involved. You've known for a while now that there's a network within the Vatican, silent, efficient, unacknowledged. Letters opened before delivery, conversations overheard through thin walls, confessions repeated by concerned monks, and yes, you've used it. Once, a year ago, you had to ensure a rival didn't receive a letter in time to attend a vote. That delay? Just enough to tilt the outcome in your favor. You told yourself it was a necessity for the church. Now, it feels like a test run. You've never met the man in charge of the network directly, but he exists. Possibly Jesuit, possibly not. Some say he works out of a small chamber near the papal archives. Others say he disguises himself as a confessor to eavesdrop on the elite. You don't care what he looks like. You care that he delivers. You send a message, not written, never that foolish. Just a phrase, passed verbally through a trusted brother. The nightingales are circling. It's an old phrase, coded. It means, "Who's watching me?" 3 days later, you receive your answer. A note tucked beneath your chalice during Vespers. 7 words in flawless Latin. Only the blind escape the eyes of Rome. It's not comforting. You begin to check your rooms more often. You stop speaking freely, even to your most trusted aides. You memorize every guard's shift, every candle's flicker, but you don't stop moving, because the moment you freeze, you become the next rumor. So you adapt. You start passing your messages through psalms, slight changes in your recitations, known only to those who've been trained to listen. It's archaic, absurd, and wonderfully effective. One evening, while overseeing an ordination in your diocese, you catch a novice reciting Psalm 69 with a single word inverted. Your stomach turns. That's one of your codes. You find him afterward. He's terrified, trembling. He wasn't supposed to know the full message, just enough to deliver a reply. You ask gently, "What did you hear?" He stammers. They say there's a list of names, marked with ash, 1 per month. You dismiss him kindly, bless him, send him back to his cell. Then you lock your doors. Historians still argue whether the Vatican had a centralized intelligence operation during the Renaissance. There's evidence for it. Intercepted letters, sudden arrests, confessions that came too easily, but nothing definitive. That's the genius of it. A secret that thrives because it's never proven. You stare into your hearth, watching the coals flicker, and you realize you're no longer playing the game. You're part of the board, and every move from now on must be made with silence and fire. The longer you stay in this world, the more you realize Renaissance Rome doesn't run on scripture. It runs on secrets. And secrets, like relics, are traded with reverence. The Vatican spy network, though unofficial, becomes more visible the more carefully you look. Monks who seem to appear just before you speak. Nuns whose eyes linger a beat too long. Choir boys whose memory for detail exceeds anything in the Book of Psalms. You don't fear them. You use them. One of your most reliable informants is a scribe in the papal chancery. Quiet, meticulous, and utterly forgettable, which is perfect. He copies bulls, encyclicals, diplomatic letters, often catching early versions before they're approved. You never meet him. You never speak his name. Instead, you leave a token. A small ivory token, carved like a fish, left under the 3rd pew from the right in the chapel of the Holy Lands. If he has something for you, he replaces it with a feather. This week, you find a feather. That night, you retrieve a slip of parchment hidden inside a hollowed-out psalter. The message? Florence preparing new maps, not for decoration. You frown. Cartography is never just geography. Not in this world. Maps determine trade routes, tax boundaries, even which bishops have jurisdiction over which villagers. And Florence drawing new maps? That means they're planning something. You send word to your contact in Tuscany. Again, no names, no ink. Just a verse from Ecclesiastes, smuggled through a merchant's invoice. While you wait, you receive an invitation. Not from a cardinal, from an artist. Michelangelo. He's painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling now, and apparently, your name came up in conversation. You've always admired his work. The rawness, the muscle, the barely restrained violence in every sacred gesture. You visit the chapel after hours. He doesn't greet you, just grunts from the top of his scaffold, brush flicking pigment as if divine wrath could be coaxed into fresco. The room smells of sweat, turpentine, and genius. You're the one with the ear, he says without turning. The one they whisper to. You say nothing. He drops a ladder, clambers down. He's covered in paint and dust and irritation. He points at a half-finished panel. See that angel? That one's not for heaven. That one's for the ones who pretend they already live there. You nod, slowly. Be careful who hears what you see, he mutters. Then he returns to his scaffold and becomes silent once more. Historians still debate how much artists of the era knew of Vatican politics. Some claim they were protected, cloaked in patronage and creative immunity. Others believe they were observant shadows, painting what they couldn't say. You suspect the latter. Michelangelo sees more than marble. The next day, word arrives from Florence. Their maps are not geographic. They're electoral. They've been tracking papal alliances, vote patterns, which cardinal favors which city-state. A living ledger of Vatican loyalty. And worse, they're using it to court support. The Medici, always subtle, are planning to position a family candidate for the next conclave. You're not shocked, just disappointed you didn't hear it first. You take action immediately. First, you write to a Venetian bishop known for his gambling debts. You remind him, gently, that Rome has always looked favorably upon bishops who defend her interests. Then, you send word to a Spanish diplomat with a grudge against Florence and a fondness for wine-soaked flattery. You begin weaving a countermap. Quietly, you list names, influence levels, weaknesses. You don't plot a coup. You plot a correction. You're in the Vatican gardens when the next message comes. Delivered not by courier or spy, but by a gardener. She hands you a flower, a perfectly cut lily. Inside, folded like a blessing, is a single sentence. The French are listening too. Of course they are. France never misses a chance to meddle in Rome. You meet with a French cardinal over dinner. He's all smiles and cheese and cunning. He asks about your peaceful diocese. You talk about the weather. He asks about Michelangelo's progress. You compliment the ceiling. He asks about Florence. You mention the Duomo. Eventually, he leans in. I hear the Holy Father is tired. You smile, tilt your wine, and say, "Aren't we all?" He doesn't press, but the message is clear. Everyone is preparing for the next conclave. Even the ceiling seems to press lower with that knowledge. You begin preparing your letters, endorsements, rejections, carefully coded blessings. One night, while reviewing a dispatch from Avignon, you hear footsteps. Your door creaks open. A figure stands in the candlelight, one of the papal guards, not one you recognize. He hands you a sealed scroll. No emblem, no wax. You open it slowly, just 5 words. Not all angels have wings. You stare at it, you burn it, and you go to bed knowing you've stepped deeper into the game than ever before. Not as a pawn, not yet as a king, but something new, a scribe of the invisible war, where battles are drawn in ink, and the victor is the one who remains unread. It begins with a scroll, not sealed, not urgent, just unexpected. A letter from Florence, but not from the Medici. This one bears the unmistakable watermark of the Pazzi. Yes, the other family, the rivals, the ones who once tried to hang a Medici from the rafters of the cathedral mid-mass. You've read about the infamous Pazzi conspiracy. Some say the dagger used was blessed. Some say it was cursed. You read the letter in full before your wine even cools. It's formal, subtle, and brimming with danger. They request your help, not in undermining the papacy, not directly. Just a small matter of facilitating a voice at the next council. A voice, they assure you, that has Florence's soul in mind, even if not its current purse. You smile. This is what ambition sounds like when it's dressed for church. You don't reply immediately. You wait. You walk. You think. In the gardens near the Vatican archives, you pass under olive trees older than some nations. You trace a finger across the ancient stone fountain, cracked, mossy, whispering. Because in Rome, even the water has heard secrets. The next morning, you respond. Not in ink. You send a relic, a small wooden rosary, old, weathered. Each bead carved with a different saint's name. But one bead, the 11th, is smooth, blank. They'll understand the message. There's space for a new saint, or a new power. A week later, a shipment arrives at your diocese. Inside, 3 paintings, unsigned. You recognize the artist, an apprentice of Botticelli. They depict biblical scenes, of course, but with unmistakable Florentine architecture in the background. It's a gift, wrapped in aesthetics. The Renaissance has taught you something important. Art is never just art. It's influence made visible. Historians still argue whether art in this period served the soul or the state, whether the patrons who paid for angels and nudes did so for salvation or legacy. But you don't argue. You hang one of the paintings in your study, not because it's beautiful, though it is, but because it's a message. You are watching, you are participating, and you are reachable. That night, another courier arrives, this time from Ferrara, the Este family. Of course, the game is spreading. They want support for a marriage between their youngest daughter and a cousin of a cardinal. The match, they say, would stabilize regional alliances and honor the Holy Father's dream of unity. You draft your response the next morning. Short, polite, affirming, because you know exactly what they're doing, and they know you know. But you also know something they don't. This week, you've been asked to review a list, a private list, of candidates for the next College of Cardinals, prepared personally by Alexander VI. You sit in your chamber, firelight dancing on the parchment, and read the names slowly. Some you recognize, some surprise you. One chills you, Cesare Borgia. Yes, still officially a cardinal. Still, technically, a man of the cloth, even as he commands troops, reorganizes papal lands, and sets foreign policy with all the grace of a general. You trace the ink of his name with your fingertip. Is this real or bait? Adding Cesare would guarantee loyalty, but it would also signal desperation. The Pope might be showing his hand, or bluffing. And then, another name. A name you've never seen before. A merchant's son from Milan. No noble blood, no theological background, just rich. You almost laugh, but then you stop, because you remember, the church has always had room for gold. You finish your review, sign off, and send the list back with one note. God chooses his shepherds. Rome organizes the flock. The courier doesn't blink. He knows better than to ask. That evening, you attend a quiet mass held in the Sistine Chapel. The ceiling is nearly finished now. Michelangelo's figures float above you, twisting, falling, rising. Their eyes, locked in judgment and agony. And in the corner, near the altar, you see it. A new painting, not part of the plan. A small angel, almost invisible, tucked beneath a cloud, holding a scroll, and looking directly at the viewer. You ask a nearby cleric, "Was that always there?" He shrugs. Maybe, maybe not. But you know, it's Michelangelo's message. To you, to Rome, to God, doesn't matter, because that angel is watching. And suddenly so are you. Not just the maps, not just the letters, but the faces, the reactions, the timing, the silences. You begin to keep a journal. Not for posterity, but for pattern. Every phrase, every tremor, every quote that felt too rehearsed. You're not paranoid. You're prepared. Because now, the next election is no longer abstract. It's coming. And whether it arrives with white smoke or a thunderclap, you'll be ready. Still awake? That's okay. I'm still here. Let me keep telling you this story. There's a curious job in Rome, one that few people know exists, and even fewer understand. Advocatus Diaboli, the devil's advocate. It's not metaphorical. It's an actual office, a real role. A man tasked with one peculiar responsibility, to argue against the canonization of saints. And this week, you've been asked to take his place. Temporarily, of course. Officially, the current holder is indisposed. Unofficially, he disagreed with a recent appointment and is now praying in seclusion, a convenient term often synonymous with exile. So, for now, you are the skeptic, the doubter, the lone voice in a chorus of certainty. The case on your desk involves a bishop from Naples who allegedly performed 3 miracles: 1 healing, 1 vision, and 1 episode involving a speaking dove. The usual trifecta. You read the testimonies. You interview witnesses. You ask uncomfortable questions. Did the blind man really regain sight, or just partial clarity? Was the vision divine, or hallucination from too much fermented fig wine? And the dove? Could it have been trained? The answers are vague, muddied by time, memory, and emotion. Still, the pressure to canonize is immense. The family has money. The region needs a patron saint. And the Holy Father, sickly, fatigued, and increasingly silent, wants to leave behind a legacy of holiness. But you pause. Not because you disbelieve miracles, because you understand their value. A new saint brings pilgrimages, donations, stability. And stability, in this papacy, is rare. Historians still argue whether the devil's advocate role was truly skeptical or merely ceremonial, whether it served as a genuine check or just an intellectual performance. You know the answer now. It's both. And so, during the tribunal, you stand and speak, softly, thoughtfully, not with scorn, but with detail. You mention discrepancies in dates. You note inconsistencies in the dove's behavior. You suggest alternative explanations. And then you stop. Not because you've disproved the miracles, but because you've done enough. The others nod. The bishop will be canonized. The faithful will celebrate. And your skepticism will be forgotten by morning, but not by everyone. That night, as you return to your chambers, there's a note tucked into your psalter. 1 sentence. We like how you think. No signature, no seal. You burn it anyway, because it's never the words that matter in Rome. It's the timing. 2 days later, you're summoned again. This time by a lesser-known cardinal with ties to Milan. You expect pleasantries. Instead, he gets right to the point. There's going to be a split, he says. You say nothing. A divide, he continues, within the college, between those who still serve the Holy Father and those who already look past him. He hands you a list, not names, just initials. You recognize half of them. You'll have to choose, he says, soon. You leave without responding, but your mind is already moving. You begin watching Mass more carefully. Who receives communion? Who lingers near the altar? Who glances toward the throne? Who avoids it? Patterns emerge. A faction loyal to Cesare, a faction tied to France, and now a third faction, quiet, economic, organized, not flashy, not violent, just building. It's that third one that catches your interest. They don't talk much, but they always listen. You attend a private gathering in Trastevere, hosted by a scholar priest who once taught rhetoric in Padua. He claims it's a discussion group on Thomistic philosophy. It's not. It's an audition. 7 men, 3 women, all clergy, all sharp. They discuss doctrine, yes, but they also chart out scenarios. What happens if the Pope dies tomorrow? Who fills the void? Who controls the treasury? Who owns the message? No one takes notes. No names are used. But you leave knowing something important. They are preparing, not for chaos, for order. You return to your study. Begin cleaning, not dusting, clearing. You burn outdated correspondences. You rebind your journals. You refile your maps by allegiance. And then you write 3 letters. 1 to Florence, 1 to Avignon, 1 to Naples, all written in the same careful hand, with the same cryptic verse. The dove sings only once. Be ready to listen. You send them, and then you wait. In the meantime, your official duties continue. You perform marriages. You preside over baptisms. You bless the sick. You listen to confessions so heavy they could sink ships. But your thoughts are elsewhere, because the conclave isn't here yet, but its shadow is. And in that shadow, you are no longer a bishop. Not just. You are an operator, a strategist, a keeper of quiet balances. And when the time comes to speak, you'll say only what is necessary, and nothing more. The bells ring out across Rome, long, low, and deliberate, not for celebration, not for ceremony, for death. The Pope has died. Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, the man who climbed the throne with charm and gold and held it with steel, now gone. You hear the news, not from an envoy, not from a herald, but from a nun, panting, half weeping in your cathedral courtyard. He collapsed, she whispers. They say the sky turned black. Dramatic, but not entirely inaccurate. A summer storm rolled in just hours before the announcement, drenching the cobblestones, turning the Tiber into a sheet of gray glass. As if the heavens themselves took notice. You remain silent. You thank her. You walk back to your chamber slowly, as if the news might change if you walk gently enough. It doesn't. The Holy Father is dead. And now, the real work begins. You already know the process. You've studied it, lived it. But this time, it's different. This time, you're a contender, not a favorite. Not yet. But your name, your alliances, will be whispered in corners lit by candlelight. Your gestures will be watched. Every nod, every pause, every amen evaluated. And so, you prepare. First, letters. You dispatch 3 immediately. 1 to Venice, 1 to Florence, and 1 to a quiet estate outside of Siena, where a retired cardinal lives with a library of bribes and grudges. You use coded phrases, not just for safety, but for elegance. You ask about the weather in Rome. You request prayers for unity amid new dawns. You hint that the shepherd's staff may pass hands again, each message wrapped in scripture, each signature humble but unmistakable. Then, you secure transport. Rome must be reached discreetly. Showy entrances are for fools and favorites. You travel under modest cover, dressed as a lesser bishop, flanked by a single servant who speaks only when necessary and prays twice as often as you do. As you near the city, the changes are already visible. Shops closed, guards posted, priests on every corner offering blessings to both the faithful and the fearful. Because the death of a pope means more than loss. It means power has become fluid, dangerous, liquid gold. The Vatican gates open for you without delay. Your name still carries weight. The chamber is prepared, simple, silent, secure. You breathe deeply. It smells the same as it always does, like paper, wax, ambition. The College of Cardinals will gather in 3 days. Until then, the world watches, and you listen. You walk the halls of the Apostolic Palace, where even the frescoes seem to lean in. You pass the Hall of Maps, the courtyard of San Damaso, the hidden spiral staircase only the papal household uses. And then you see him, Cesare Borgia. He's not in red anymore. He shed his cardinal robes months ago. Now he wears armor beneath silk, and his smile has sharpened to a blade. You meet his gaze across a stone corridor. He nods once. You nod back, because that's all it takes. In Rome, a nod can mean, I remember, or I forgive, or I will ruin you later. Later that evening, you dine privately with 3 other cardinals. Allies, though you still count their forks before sitting down. The topic, unspoken but understood, circles the table. Who will rise? France is pushing for Cardinal Amboise. Charming, eloquent, too smooth by half. Spain has several in mind, though none with real teeth. Florence? They want influence, not victory. And you? You say nothing. You pour the wine. You bless the meal. But your silence is calculated, because right now, speaking too early is death. But silence? That's strategy. Historians still argue about the interregnum after Alexander VI. Some claim it was the most corrupt in centuries. Others say it was the most efficient. What you remember is the stillness, the hush before the hunt. You walk the Sistine Chapel that night, alone. The ceiling, finished now, stares back at you. Prophets, sibyls, the creation of man. You look up and find your favorite panel, David and Goliath. The moment just before the stone flies. You understand that moment. You are in it now. Then a sound. Footsteps. You turn. It's Cardinal Piccolomini. Old. Frail. Still sharp. He walks with a cane and an agenda. You'll vote wisely, I hope, he says. You smile. I'll vote carefully. He nods. Careful men die last. And then he continues walking. You stand in silence long after he's gone. Tomorrow the doors will close. The conclave will begin. And you, bishop, whisperer, advocate, strategist, will choose or be chosen. Either way, history waits. The doors shut with the sound of finality you remember well, a thunderclap of wood and ritual. Come, clave, with a key. Once again, you are sealed inside the Sistine Chapel, but this time, you are not just a player in someone else's strategy. You are part of the endgame. This is your second conclave, but it feels nothing like the first. The air is heavier, the glance is sharper, the alliances already half written into the lines on everyone's foreheads. The first night is quiet, save for the scrape of chairs and the soft murmurs of old men pretending to sleep while counting votes. There are 32 cardinals in the chamber, but only 7 matter. You are one of them. You eat little. You speak less. You walk slowly around the cloister when no one else does, watching the shadows, listening to who coughs, who mutters in their dreams, who prays too loudly. Morning comes with birdsong and barely warm bread. The ballots are handed out on stiff parchment, folded in thirds, written by hand. You write your choice carefully. Not you. Not yet. That's the trick. Never vote for yourself in the first round. Let others make the mistake of showing their hand too early. The names read aloud are expected. Cardinal Amboise, Cardinal Carafa, Cardinal Grimani. One wild vote for Cardinal della Rovere, sent by his cousin, no doubt, for nostalgia. You receive 3 votes, enough to raise eyebrows, not enough to become a target, just right. The black smoke curls into the sky, and the Roman crowd sighs. No pope, not yet. But something's shifting. That evening, a messenger taps your shoulder during supper, a young monk, shaking slightly. He leans in, whispers, Cesare wants to speak. You follow him through a maze of corridors to a forgotten chamber behind the sacristy. Cesare Borgia waits by a narrow window, his armor dulled from travel, but his eyes alert. He wastes no time. You're close, he says. Not the favorite, but close. You say nothing? I could tip it, he continues. 3 votes, maybe 4. You'd need 2 more. Still, you stay silent. Then he leans in. But I'd need something. There it is. What? You ask softly. Recognition of Romagna, he says. Legitimacy. And, he pauses, a title. For my son, you study him. Cesare Borgia, the Pope's son, a former cardinal, now a warlord with blood on his hands and ambition in his bones. A man who holds cities like chess pieces. You nod. Not yes. Not number just enough. Because you're not ready to commit. Not yet. You return to your cot, lie flat, and stare at the frescoed ceiling. Angels, prophets, judgment. Michelangelo painted them with fire in his heart. You wonder if he'd laugh to see what goes on beneath their feet. The next morning, the second vote. More to you this time. 5. Someone, probably from Naples, has shifted their allegiance. You don't know who yet, but you'll find out. That evening, a note is left in your shoe. The dove lands twice. It's code, old code. It means a second offer is coming. You ready yourself. Later, in the corner of the courtyard, you meet Cardinal Ruiz, a Spaniard with eyes like cracked glass and a voice that never rises above a whisper. He offers you 2 more votes. His price? Control of a single abbey in the Pyrenees. A humble ask. Suspiciously humble. But you nod. And now you have 7. Just 2 more. And yet, the air has changed. Other cardinals are noticing. A few have begun whispering your name, not with ambition, but with concern. So you change tactics. You write a letter, not to the cardinals, to the city. It's slipped through a kitchen boy, delivered to a scribe, published in a pamphlet that somehow ends up nailed to the outer wall of the Lateran. It reads, "Let the next shepherd be not the loudest, nor the richest, but the one who hears Rome's soul through silence." It spreads. The people begin whispering. A quiet cardinal, a thoughtful one, a man who has walked with merchants and popes alike. You don't sign it, but they know. The next vote? 9. You are now tied, and the room is no longer calm. Voices rise, alliances fracture. One cardinal refuses to speak to another. Someone's cot is moved. Bread is withheld from a rival's plate. But you stay calm, because you know what they don't. Chaos breeds consensus. All you have to do is wait 1 more day. If sleep doesn't come easy these days, maybe this quiet space can be yours, just for a while. The final night arrives with thunder. Not metaphor, but real low-booming thunder that rolls across the Roman sky, like the warning of a god, unsure whether to weep or laugh. You sit at the edge of your cot, unmoving, while rain taps on the windows of the Sistine Chapel like 1,000 fingers, impatient for resolution. 9 votes. You've never been closer. But close, as history shows, is also where the knives come out. A young cardinal from France refuses to meet your eyes. Cardinal Amboise no longer smiles when your name is read aloud. Even Cardinal Ruiz, who promised you 2 votes, now keeps to himself. His hands folded tightly during evening prayer, as if hiding more than a rosary. It's begun. The stall. When a candidate edges toward victory, the others often unite, not out of loyalty, but fear. The conclave becomes a tightening ring of egos, none wanting the others to win, but none wanting you to win either. So they wait, or worse, delay by promoting chaos. You've seen this before. Votes scattered across absurd candidates, invented out of spite. In one conclave, someone voted for a man who died 3 years prior, just to make a point. The storm outside is nothing compared to the one inside. And then, a new name appears. Cardinal Bellini. Elderly, inoffensive, liked, but never considered. Suddenly, he gets 4 votes. Then 5. A compromise candidate. A ghost pope, meant to rule briefly, die quickly, and make way for someone else. You sit in silence. You don't speak. You don't move. Because now the test is not of power. It's of stillness. Historians still argue whether compromise candidates were ever truly chosen or merely tolerated. Some rose to greatness. Others faded within months. But all shared one trait. They were accepted, not wanted. And you will not be accepted that way. That night, you make your final move. Not with a bribe, not with a threat, with a story. You call together 6 men, privately, over a modest meal, in the shadows of the chapel's outer cloisters. Bread, olives, no meat, no wine, just your voice and theirs. And you speak of Alexander VI, of Cesare's ambitions, of the danger of compromise, of Rome's need for stability, not a placeholder, but a pilgrim pope. One who has walked among the cities, spoken to every faction, survived every storm. You end not with a promise, but a confession. I do not ask to be pope, you say quietly. I ask not to wake to one chosen in fear. They sit in silence. No one replies. But one by one, they nod and leave. You return to your cot, heart steady. You don't pray. You've already prayed enough. Instead, you sleep. And when you wake, it's not to thunder. It's to bells, not funeral bells. Jubilation. You rise, your joints stiff, your mouth dry. A young priest appears at your door, pale with disbelief. They've chosen, he says. You nod, not in shock, in understanding. You dress slowly, simply, no fanfare, no flourish, and you walk. Down the stone corridors, past the whispers and gasps, through the great doors, to the balcony. The rain has stopped. The clouds have broken. The crowd waits. You feel the wind. You hear the name being spoken. Yours. Not shouted, but breathed. A ripple across the sea of upturned faces. You raise your hand, not in command, in acceptance. And then you speak, not for the crowd, not even for the church, but for the moment. A single line. May we walk slower now and listen longer. The crowd quiets, then cheers. The white smoke still curls above you, but your thoughts are already past the ceremony, past the robes, past the tiara you will likely refuse. You think of the letters you'll write, the reforms they won't expect, the secrets you'll carry forward, because this game is not over. It's just begun. And now you play from the tallest seat in Christendom, where every word echoes, and silence speaks loudest of all. The first night as Pope is not what you imagined. There are no feasts, no celestial visions, no divine revelations carved into the stone of your soul. Just candlelight, silence, and the overwhelming smell of old wood and older books in your temporary papal quarters. They bring you new robes, heavier, stiffer than your old ones, embroidered with gold, meant to dazzle. You wear them only long enough for the ceremony. Then you return to your plain vestments, the ones that breathe, the ones that belong to you. The College of Cardinals gathers in private the next morning to offer their obedience. They kneel. They kiss your ring. Some smile. Some merely pretend to. But all say the words. We serve. And you believe some of them even mean it. Cesare Borgia is not present. He has already left Rome. That was his final message to you. I do not kneel. You respect it and fear it, because even as Pope, your reign is not invulnerable. Your enemies now simply smile at you in Latin. You begin your work quickly. The Vatican treasury, a mess of competing ledgers and hidden debts. You appoint a trusted Jesuit, one who doesn't drink, doesn't blink, and doesn't take bribes, to review every document. Within days, 5 bishops retire. Voluntarily, you visit the sick. You simplify the Mass. You send a handwritten letter to the Bishop of Florence. Not dictated, not polished, just written. You close it with a single phrase. Unity must begin with someone stepping down first. They'll understand, but not everyone does. Within a month, pamphlets begin to appear. Anonymous, angry. They say you are soft. They say you are foreign. They say you are too slow to punish and too quick to forgive. You let them say it, because you know something they don't. Every pope is 2 people, the public face and the quiet hand. You still attend vespers like a simple bishop. You walk the gardens without a guard. You listen to servants speak when they think you're out of earshot. And in the shadows, the network that once whispered to you now whispers for you. You use it not for vengeance, but for clarity. You learn which cardinal siphons funds through false relics, which bishop hides his debts in cathedral renovations, which city plans to withhold taxes. You write letters. You summon none of them, and one by one, they come to you, repentant, or pretending to be. You accept both, because the Church does not move through purity alone. It moves through balance. Historians will someday write about your reign. Some will call it meek. Some will call it wise. Most will call it short, because you are not young. You feel it in your bones. But you're not here to rule forever. You're here to reset the wheel. And as the year turns, so does Rome. The crowds still gather to hear your blessings. But now, they listen more closely. Because you speak less. Because when you do speak, you mean it. You write one final letter before winter. To the next generation. To a cardinal not yet ready to lead, but ready to learn. You write, do not chase the throne. Learn where its shadow falls. Then step into the light. And then, one morning, you wake early. The sun is not yet risen. The chapel is still. The world holds its breath. And you walk, barefoot, to the altar. You kneel. And for the first time in many years, you pray. Not as a bishop. Not as a pope. Not as a player in Rome's endless game. But as a man who remembers what it felt like to believe that all of this began with faith and might still end with it. And now, as the candlelight flickers low and the echoes of the Sistine Chapel fade from your ears, take a deep breath. You've walked through centuries tonight, past frescoes and betrayal, through chambers of gold and whispers, alongside men who wore halos and daggers in the same hand. You've seen what it means to rise in Rome, to bow when necessary, to speak when silence has stretched too long. Let the politics drift now. Let the names blur and the voices hush. Think instead of the feel of those cold marble floors beneath your feet, the hush of cloisters in the early hours, the way the light catches dust in the air, as if time itself paused just long enough for you to notice it. Your breath slows, your thoughts untangle. Let go of conclaves and cardinals. Let go of bulls and ballots, of bells and burdens. You are not in the Vatican anymore. You are here now, in the stillness of your own room, in the quiet at the edge of sleep. No longer a pope, not a bishop, not a schemer, not a scribe, just a soul, breathing, safe, warm, drifting. Let the curtains billow softly. Let the world outside disappear. Let the hush of ancient Rome dissolve into dream. The game is over for tonight, and your crown, dear listener, is made of stars. Wherever you are, I hope your night is calm, your mind is light, and your dreams are kind.